What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and we are back. This time we've got all three of our frame pieces, the front frame, the back frame, and the top frame, and we are ready to attach them all to our chassis. So that's what we're going to do in this video, but before we get started, let's give a special thanks to Argosy for making this all possible, to First and Andymark for parts and support, and to Team 302, Lake Orion High School, for hosting our studio. First step is going to be to attach either the front or the back frame. I'll do the front frame, the shorter one. And the front frame, what we're looking for is there are 3 holes on one side, and then there are 2 holes on the other side. So we've got that on, I guess on both of these. We drilled both of these, so neither of these are pre-drilled. And the 2 holes are going to go down on the bottom to attach everything. The other thing to keep in mind when we go to attach this is we have T-brackets on one side and nothing on the other. The T-bracket should be facing out towards the outside of the robot. So the inside will have the nothing and the extra bolt stuff sticking out, and then the outside will be sort of the flatter side with the T-brackets. Now let's see if we can find the holes that we want to line up for this. So on the inside of the frame here, we've got almost like a whole grid pattern of holes. If you go all the way up to the very front of this inside plate, there is sort of this whole pattern here it's like a 3 by 3 grid of holes. And there's one more hole buried up in this corner that you can't see. It's okay, don't worry about it. Now, we're not going to do the first row of holes or that second row of holes. We're looking for the third row of holes, which is also, if you go to where there's 2 holes and then a big hole, we're going back towards the outside of the frame from that to these 3 holes in a row. And if I sort of bring the piece in here, you can see like it's hitting the front frame. So I couldn't get to the first 2 rows of holes anyway. Like this is the first row of holes that this piece could potentially line up with. And we're going to be going for the top 2 holes. So this one and this one. Those 2 holes are going to line up with the 2 holes on our frame piece. So just like that. And we can actually drop a couple bolts in to sort of line this up and help it be guided. And this is a situation where even if you're using rivets on the rest of your robot, this will need to be bolts. And these are, of course, the same 1.5-inch button head bolts that we've been using for everything else on the robot so far. And I can go ahead and put some on the other side. These are probably going to fall out, but we won't worry about it too much. Now, in order to really see what we're doing on the next step, there's a couple ways that you could do this. Like one is if you slide this off the edge of the table, you can sort of reach up from the bottom and do all the things that we're going to do. And if you do it that way, your bolts are probably going to be less likely to fall out. But just so you can kind of see everything that's going on, I think what we want to do is we want to flip this robot up on its side. And I'm doing my best to kind of hold those bolts in place, but we may lose them. And now we can kind of look in from the bottom of the robot to see where those bolts are popping through. Let me grab the tools and the nuts here. All right, so we can see there's one there. Kind of come around a little bit more. There we go. So there are 2 bolts in here. We can see kind of both of them. I can make them move up and down a little bit. And we need to get nuts on the tops of those. There's almost no way that I'm going to be able to grab a nut and reach in there and spin it on. Maybe the close one, but the far one, there is no chance at all that I'm going to be able to do that. So there are a couple things that we want to do. I think we were talking in an earlier video about how I always like to do the harder bolt first. Because if I do the first one and I lock down on the first one, now that's in the way for me to get to the second one. And that might be okay. There are ways around it. But if I kind of take that first bolt out, what I want to do is get the nut to the back bolt. And then instead of using my fingers to twist the nut to make it go on, I'm going to spin the bolt with my other hand to make it go on. But in order to line it up, the first thing I want to do is bring that bolt down until it's just below the surface of the metal there. Then I can put the nut on this surface, and I can hold it with my finger and slide it all the way back until it's lined up. So like I can reach all the way back there to where that hole is. And you definitely can look some, but you can also feel it. When you start pushing, I'm pushing up on the bolt now from the bottom. And when I start pushing up on that bolt, I can sort of feel it finding the nut. And so now we are started. That is partially attached there. So we'll go ahead now and tighten that down. This is an interesting process because if you don't have, you can't use a socket here. And if you don't have a ratcheting wrench, you're going to have to tighten it a little bit and then either take the Allen wrench out and reset, or you can take the wrench off. I think it's faster to take the wrench off and then spin the Allen wrench back around and then reattach, spin the Allen wrench, and just keep repeating that process. I think it's faster to engage and disengage the regular wrench than it is the Allen wrench. And as you start tightening it down, now the bolt's short enough that I can just stay right on the surface of the aluminum when I'm doing this. So out, reset, in, tighten. Okay, and we're going to make this one not quite all the way tight because we still want to make sure this whole thing can move so our other bolt can line up and go in here. All right, the next way you can do this, and I know this is a little bit of an easier hole, but that's okay, is if we get a little piece of tape, should be plenty. What you can do is you can take the tape and you can put it across the back of your wrench like this. Usually I like to not have it sticking up too much. And then if you take a nut, you can put that inside of the wrench and squeeze it down onto the tape. So now that's stuck on there and it's not going anywhere. Now, instead of having to get my finger to reach in and hold stuff, the wrench will fit. So I think personally, I prefer using my finger if I can reach it because I sort of have more tactile feedback. I can feel when the bolt's pressing on it and try to arrange it to get to the center. But in areas where like I have decently long fingers, maybe your finger's not long enough to reach all the way to that back hole. Well, then you're going to want to use the wrench. Maybe, I guess this space is pretty big, so your finger will probably fit, but there will be sometimes spaces where your finger is just too big and it doesn't fit in there. Well, the wrench is much skinnier, so that has a good chance of sliding in. All right, so let's go ahead and get the second bolt back up through the hole. And for me, I like to get the bolt started through the hole first, just because then I know it's lined up and I don't have to worry about messing with that when I go to get the nut lined up in place. So then again, I'll pull it back down below the surface, bring the wrench in until it feels like it's lined up, and then you can start trying to screw the bolt in. Oh, I dropped mine a little bit because I thought I had it and I did not. So we try again. And with this one too, sometimes, especially this close one, you could leave the bolt up in the air a little bit. Like last time I wanted to be able to slide it back because I could only get my finger pushing against the surface to slide it in there. On this one, because I can like try to line it up and it's taped in place, this can be up in the air a little bit too to help you find that spot where it's going to be lined up. And then it is the same thing. Once it's lined up, you just got to twist it with your other hand until you get to the nylock. Then you can pop the tape off. And we have the same process of going ahead and screwing this in. So if you do have a ratcheting wrench, I'll go ahead and do that this way because I think that's much, well, it's faster if you don't drop all your tools. All right, here we go. Okay, and I'm going to make this one tight, and then I'll go ahead and make the other one tight just because I have bolts on the other side already. If you didn't put bolts on the other side, you might want to leave these loose. You can also roll the dice. You can tighten these, and then you might have to loosen them if the other bolts don't fit. Now, this is a little bit tricky because now that this bolt is in the way, getting the wrench on the back bolt is a little bit harder. I'm going to have to kind of do it on a little bit of an angle, but it does work, and you can get there, and you can get that other bolt tightened. All right. So we're good on that side. Now we got to flip the whole thing over so we can work on the other side. So I guess I'll go this way. Bring it over a little towards me. Now those bolts might fall out at any time, so I got to be a little careful. All right. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I'll take the first one out so I can get to the second one. Let's go ahead and do the tape trick for this one, just so you get one example of the tape trick on the near and the far bolt. All right, so we'll get the nut on there. And then again, I just want to get enough so I can hold on to that and be able to twist it. And then we'll reach that wrench in, try to get it settled right on top of it, and start screwing it in. Perfect. And this tape trick works a little bit better if you use the box end of the wrench, the closed end, because then the bolt is also supported kind of on more sides. But I do have an issue with my ratcheting wrench, which is I can't even get that side on here. It's a little bit too close to the wall for me. So we'll go ahead and tighten this one in the same way we did the first far one, which is by removing and replacing our wrench as we go. So we'll tighten it, spin it out, do it again. Okay, and I'll stop when that one's just a little bit loose, just to make sure I can get the other bolt back in. And that is our goal now. Pop the other bolt in. Good. And then this one, I'll try to just get it lined up with my finger. So I'll place the nut on this place, slide it in till it looks good, hold it from the top, and twist the bolt on the bottom, and we're good. And then I'm going to take advantage of my ratchet because it seems crazy not to. All right, and we're tight on that one. Remember, I wanted to go back and tighten the back one just a little bit. And that seems good. I will mention too, on the wrench, if you'll notice, all the wrenches, they're not quite the same. Like, it's always twisted a little bit, and one side's a little skinnier, one side's a little fatter, but you also get a little bit of a different angle. So like when you're reaching in here to try to get around the first one, my wrench fits nicely this way, but if I flip the wrench over, it doesn't really fit from this side as well. I could probably sneak it in underneath the pulley from the other side that way, though. So you got a bunch of different ways that you can try to access it, but just know that flipping the wrench over sometimes will help you out. All right, those two are, or that one front frame is now attached. Let's tip this back down so you can get the proper perspective where up is up. Okay, and once again, make sure your T-brackets are on the outside of the robot and that nothing is on the inside. And we've got our 3 holes on the top. Then let's grab our back frame. Now, the back frame has T-brackets on one side again. Those T-brackets should be facing away from the other piece, so once again towards the outside of the robot. And ideally, if your T-brackets are the outside of the robot and we did everything in the previous step right, the robot signal light should be pointing in towards the middle of the robot. And the little ledge where we're going to attach our radio later should be pointing in towards the middle of the robot. And this is exactly the same process now. Same bolt holes. We have the same 3x3 grid pattern. Basically, if you bring this back so it's just about touching the frame, that's where we're going to want to be. And we are just going to try to get this lined up with some of the holes. And just slide. I'm going to slide all 4 bolts in once again just for alignment purposes to try to keep everything lined up. Now, if you have the not pre-drilled material, the bottom hole is going to go in the second. So the bottom hole on the pre-drilled material is going to go into the middle hole on the frame, the bottom hole that we're attaching. Then skip a hole, and the third hole up from the bottom should go in the top hole on the frame. Like that. Okay, that looks good. Next step then is for us to tip this up, and then we can use the same technique we used before to get those nuts attached. All right, so first one here, I'm going to drop that, wrong one, drop the front nut, or front bolt out of the way. So I can reach back with the back one. Now, at this point, you know, like if you like the wrench and tape method, use that. If you like the sliding it with your finger method, use that. I told you I'm slightly preferential to the finger and sliding method, so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to get this one started. Probably now it's going to be in the way of my wrench, and I'm going to be sorry, but we'll try it this way. All right. So we're going to tighten that far one first. Like I said, I think coming from the edge seems to be okay. So we'll just keep doing what we did before. Yeah, I definitely think it was probably a mistake to start the other bolt, but it's too late. We've come too far. There's no turning back now. It'll just take me a little longer each time to re-engage the wrench here. Now you got it figured out. Now it's going fast. All right, and since right now I have all 4 bolts in, I have 2 bolts on the other side for alignment purposes, and we started the second bolt here. The good news is I can definitely just take this one all the way until it's tight, and I'm happy with how tight it is. All right, and then we'll just switch to the front bolt. Definitely going to use the ratchet. We're almost there, and that's tight. Cool. Again, because we don't want to crush the box, we're not over tightening it. Next step, we're going to flip the whole thing over one more time. It's harder to do it now that the front frame is there. I gotta kind of dodge stuff as we spin it over. All right, there we go. Okay. And okay, that one's just going to fall out. I'm going to have to put it back in when I get back to this side. Actually, I got to slide it over a little bit closer so I can reach. All right, and we got that back bolt to go for here. So I'm going to put the plate on. We'll slide it back until it's lined up and start spinning. Actually, where I'm standing now, too, I have a really good line of sight to that, so that worked out really well for me. Let's go ahead and tighten this one all the way, and then we'll get our last bolt. I guess I'm kind of just doing this naturally, but when you put the wrench on and I'm turning the Allen wrench on the bottom, if the top wrench has some room to move too, you might as well move that. That's going to save you a couple of extra turns. And that is tight. Okay. So we're hoping the front hole still lines up because it was before we did everything. If this doesn't go in easily, you might have to loosen up that back bolt just to readjust things. But now that is there. We'll go ahead and put the bolt on. Try to get that lined up with the hole. Hold it down and twist it in. And we tighten again. And that's good. All right. Tip the whole thing back. Guess if we want to keep our original orientation, I'll spin it around too. Okay, so this is now officially the front of our robot. This is now officially the back of our robot. Double check your T-brackets are facing away from each other towards the outside of the robot. and we've got our radio mount and our robot signal light facing in. Now, if you get to this point and you find out, hey, my radio mount is backwards or my robot signal mount is backwards, just either unbolt it or drill out the rivets. You can flip it around. You can just reattach it. It's not a big deal. OK, now things get a little trickier. We're going to take our top frame, which is this giant thing here. And this is eventually going to sit on here something like that. I can almost let go of it. So that's our goal. The wheels should be on the front of the robot above the short bar. And then the opening on the back here, right, should be to the tall side. And the H piece that we made, our front frame H, should be inside of our KitBot 2025 and our SendCut Send plates. And this is another spot where you can do this with rivets, but I would actually do this front with bolts just because it's going to help us align things and adjust things. And you can always swap it for rivets later if that's the case. Now, these 3 holes coming down, we need to line up with the 3 holes on the box behind it. So that's what I'm going to kind of be trying to do. And I can see they're there. And I'm just going to try to get a bolt in the top hole. And I want to get that all the way through the box on the other side. OK, and then I'll do another bolt on the bottom hole. And those 2 bolts should keep everything aligned on this side. All right, that's in. One thing I want to definitely do, though, is I don't want those bolts to be able to fall out. So I'm going to take nuts, and I'm just going to finger tighten them on the back side here. But I'm not really going to do, well, I mean, we could get them close. I'm not going to do any more than that. Like this being able to move around like that is fine for me right now. I'm going to repeat the process now on this side. So I'm going to line up on this plate and get the top hole lined up and the bolt pushed through. And then the bottom hole. And then we'll start the 2 nuts on these as well so they can't fall out. OK. Then we've got a few more brackets left. So these are the, I don't know what shape to describe that as. Sort of like it would have been a T, but it's bent to the side, and we left some extra stuff on the side. So these brackets are going to go on the back of the robot. And they're going to go right up here like this. And what we can do is we can attach these brackets just to one of the 2 sides first, and then we can come down and align everything afterwards. So, you know, I don't think it matters which one we attach to first. I'll do this side with bolts, and then we can do the other side with rivets. So if you line it up on the top, if you have a, first of all, if you have a not drilled piece, right, we have all the holes. My circles are on the inside, but it was this hole circled. And then it was every other hole up until, well, this hole. Nope, this hole. OK, so we sort of have one hole in between where this rivet was. And that's the area where we want this plate to attach. When you put the plate on, you want to make sure that if you just sort of eyeball lining those holes up, the other 3 bolts are going down close to where this frame is. You can see if I flip this around and I line it up, those 3 holes are going way in the wrong direction. So you should be able to know which orientation it should be going. And I'll go ahead and line one up through the first hole here. And then another one up through the last hole on the plate. And then one more in the middle. Now, for these plates, we're going to be attaching a plate on both sides. So we have this plate on the outside. I'm going to take another plate I'm going to line it up here just to make sure they're facing the same direction. Then that plate, I'm going to line up on the inside as well. So you can see how this is going to basically sandwich this beam going down. That's going to give it a bunch more strength. And then we can do a bolt through. Let me go ahead and start nuts on these. I bumped the one bolt, and I was afraid that I was going to lose it. So I'm going to get a nut started on all 3 of these bolts now, too. And one more. All right, so now those bolts can't fall out. Now let's go ahead and try to get the other ones aligned. So I'm going to aim for the top hole here. And we should be close. Where is it? There it is. So it's going to be the top hole also on the box. So if you have multiple holes in the box, you can look now from the end. So if I kind of spin this a little bit for you, if we look from this end here, that bolt should be going across right at that very top hole, the one right above my finger. So make sure that's lined up. And if you get that bolt in the right spot, we can come back over and we can drop another bolt in the bottom hole of this plate. So if you're doing bolts, this is enough, every other hole. Go ahead and start the nuts on these. Okay. Now, if you're doing rivets, we'll do that on the other side just so you can see what that looks like. I could tighten these bolts down now and it would probably be fine. But what I'm going to do instead is just leave those loose. And then when we go to attach this last one with rivets, then we'll know everything that needed to be lined up was in fact lined up. So we'll spin this around. We got our last 2 plates and our rivets. Let's get the riveter. Out here. All right. And we're basically looking to do the same thing. So this plate, if I go this way, that's very wrong. So it's going to be this way. And if I go very first hole, it's going to line up with the very first hole at the end there. In this case, because it's drilled, I know which holes it's going to be. But either way, it would be the very first hole on your piece, whether it's pre-drilled or not. And I just want to see that everything is going to line up. And it is very much going to line up. So we've got kind of some starting rivets in. They may stay, they may fall out. The entire plate may fall when I go to grab the riveter, so that's fine. We know everything is going to line up now that I tried those ones, though. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the rivets as I go so they don't fall out again. So we'll do one. And then I'm going to come all the way across and do the other one here. That's going to give me good alignment across the top piece. And then I'm going to try to get one on the other side lined up. And a second one on that side, just so we know it's good. Okay, and now we can just go fill all the rest of the holes in whatever order. So that rivet was a little tight. What that means is the hole I drilled there maybe was slightly out of position. If you run into a place where you can't get the rivet to go in, first of all, I would try to force it in. But if you can't get it to go in, it's OK to take your drill and just hit that hole again, open it up a tiny bit. Try to drill as little as possible. But that looks good. And that's the same thing when we were doing bolts earlier. If your bolt didn't go all the way through and you had to run a drill through that, that is also OK. So let's go ahead and spin it around here. And now we're going to do the inside plate as well. So we need also this plate to line up. That is wrong. That is correct. And we're going to basically do the same thing. Now, if you have a riveter that can't fit in this area, then maybe just use the bolts. But I think most riveters will fit. And you see mine is hitting a little bit. But because it's plastic, I can sort of bend it out of the way. And I will just to double check, if you just have the manual riveter as well, that should also be able to line up. That actually fits even better for me. So no problem there. All right, but one manual rivet is enough for me. I'm going to go back to using the pneumatic one. All right, and we want to get one of these lined up on this side. And once you've done the outside plate, the inside holes are going to be all really close to lined up already. Since the plates are identical and we drill pressed our holes when we put it together. Now, if you didn't drill press your holes and some of those holes ended up a little bit crooked, again, if you have to, just hit it with the drill to open it up a little bit. All right, and now we're just going to go through and finish all of the open spots with rivets. Okay, that might be a situation. Well, we'll see. I'll look at that in a second, but that rivet did not want to go in. So let's look at that hole. It is definitely slightly not aligned, and that is pretty hard to make go in. So we get to do what I was talking about. Let's grab a drill. And we're going to need that number 7 drill bit, which is what we've been drilling with for all of our holes. And I'm going to do as little extra drilling as possible. So I'm just going to line this up, and I'm just going to go, and that's it. Because it was only a little bit of material in the way, and I don't want to open these holes up more than I have to. And just that little bit, the rivet fits in completely no problem. All right, that looks good. Last thing we have to do, I think, is we have to go around now and tighten all of our bolts. So let's move this drill out of the way and get the wrench and Allen wrench. And you can do it in whatever order you want. I'll go ahead and go back to this frame over here. And all the bolts are started, so we know we're good. So we're just gonna go and tighten them all down. Now, the cool part is when we're tightening to the plates like this, you can go a little bit tighter than we were when it was the box, because we can't really crush the boxes easily because we have like the giant plates spreading the force out. And the force will then get to the side of the box as well where the wall is, where it's not going to crush. So you should still tighten it kind of, the right amount, but if you over tighten these, it's not going to hurt anything. Okay, so we'll just kind of spin that one. It's tight. That one is good. All right, then over on the front, we've got the bottom bolts on this plate to tighten, and then the same ones on the other side. So let's go and get those tight as well. Now these ones, again, we are tightening directly into the box, so we don't have that benefit of the plate spreading out the force on the back. You could use washers, though. You could put a big washer on the back and help use that to spread the force out. But if it doesn't get out kind of to where the wall is on the box, it's not going to help that much. Okay, those are in and good. I will say, too, I feel a little bit of a edge still on this part that we got from the factory. So if you feel like a lip here or a sharp edge on these pieces, you can go ahead and file that down as well. Remember, anything that's sharp that's left on your robot, even if it was given to you in the kit of parts as a pre-made piece, if it's sharp and it can pop balls or it can cut people, the inspectors will find that and they'll have you fix it at the competition, so you might as well do it before you get there. All right, we've got one more spot, the other side on the front here. So we're going to go ahead and tighten these last 2 bolts down here on the bottom. Now this one's a little harder because I can't just spin because that pulley's in the way. So we will make use of the ratcheting function. Here you have space too, so if you have that socket set, we've used a few sockets earlier. So if you have a 3/8 socket, you can just use a socket instead of my ratcheting wrench that I'm using here, and it will work the same way for you. All right, looks like we're tight on that one. And our last bolt here. And good. Okay. Turn it back for continuity's sake. We are now, I'm just going to kind of inspect all of the places we attach stuff, make sure everything is in and tight. Make sure I didn't miss any bolts. They all look good. And you can now tell, like, I mean, if you try to move this around, it is very, very sturdy. And we talked about the front roller and the bearing wanting to pop out. So now is the chance, because we're now attached on the bottom, these plates, they can still bend in and out a little bit, but they're going to bend in and out a lot less than when nothing was attached down below in those areas. So go ahead and pop the bearing back in, and you can see now, like, yes, if I push on this a lot, I can get it to fall out, but it feels a little bit more sturdy. So I'm a little bit less concerned with it popping out. Under normal operating, like if it's just spinning, if I'm just kind of pulling on that belt and spinning it, it looks pretty good. What you can do is potentially if you had pieces inside here that were a little bit wider, what that might do is force the plates out farther, and that could be good. But sorry, if they're wider, they'll be pushing on the bearing and be pushing the bearing out more. So what you might need to do is if it feels like your bearing is just still hanging out, like looking like, let me see if I can replicate that. If it's hanging out where it's like just barely touching, but there's a huge gap on the outside here, you might want to go in and take some of your spacers, some of these, either the 3D printed ones or the ones that we cut out of PVC, and make them a little bit shorter. If they're a little bit shorter, they'll push less on that bearing, and it should sit a little bit nicer. If you do that and it still looks like it's falling out, you can, a little bit, if you remove this shaft collar and take the shaft off, you can try to bend in on this plate a little bit. You don't want to see a huge bend, but you can give it just a little bit of a help to stay folded in, or folded out, whichever you need. So in this case, I guess if your bearing is trying to fall out the outside, you can pull out on this. But you can't do that unless you take the shaft collar off so you can go past. But you don't want to warp, you don't want the plate to be noticeably bent. You're just trying to add maybe a little tiny, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, an 1/8 of an inch farther out at the top than at the bottom. Because if you bend it too much, then the holes aren't going to line up, and then this whole thing isn't going to spin cleanly. So I would definitely recommend the first step is to try to bring the spacer lengths down a little bit and see if that fixes your problem. OK, but mine feels good. That looks like it's not really going to fall out too easily. And like I said, we checked all of our bolts. They're attached. So I think at this point, we've got a couple of loose ends to tie up in the next video, like the battery mount and attaching our radio and robot signal light. But other than that, mechanically, this robot is assembled. So we'll get to that other stuff in the next video. But before we do, we're going to give another special thanks to Argosy for making this all possible, to First and Andymark for parts and support, and to Team 302, Lake Orion High School, for hosting our studio.